The gunshot that shattered the afternoon silence of Parowan, Utah wasn't meant for Amelia Lawson, but it might as well have been, because the bullet tore through the window of her dress shop and embedded itself in the wall 3 inches from where her youngest customer had been standing just moments before. That was in August of 1878, and it was the 3rd time in as many weeks that Samuel Harding's drunken cowboys had nearly killed someone in the process of shooting up the town for entertainment. Amelia stood in the doorway of her shop, her dark auburn hair pulled back in a practical bun, her green eyes blazing with a fury that made even the bravest men in Parowan step back. She was 24 years old, unmarried by choice, and had built her dressmaking business from nothing after arriving in Utah 3 years prior. She had left Philadelphia to escape a predetermined life of society tease and loveless marriage, and she'd be damned if she'd let some rowdy cattleman destroy what she'd worked so hard to create. Samuel Harding sat astride his black stallion in the middle of Main Street, his hat pushed back on his head, revealing sun-bleached brown hair and eyes the color of whiskey. At 27, he owned the largest cattle ranch within 50 miles, employed 24 men, and had a reputation for being as hard as the red rock canyons that surrounded the valley. He also had a reputation for letting his men blow off steam after long cattle drives, and that tolerance had just cost him dearly. "Mr. Harding," Amelia's voice cut through the nervous chatter of the townspeople who had gathered. She stepped into the dusty street, her blue calico dress swirling around her ankles. "This is the last time, the absolute last time your men terrorize this town." Samuel looked down at her from his horse, and something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or respect. Most people in Parowan either feared him or wanted something from him. This woman looked like she wanted to skin him alive. "Miss Lawson, I apologize for my men's behavior. I'll pay for the damages to your shop." "Pay for the damages?" Amelia's voice rose, and she took another step closer to his horse. "Your man nearly killed 8-year-old Sarah Mitchell. She was standing right where that bullet came through. Money doesn't fix that, Mr. Harding. Money doesn't give that little girl back the innocence she lost when she realized she could have died today." The cowboy who had fired the shot, a thick-necked man named Dutch Anderson, laughed from where he sat slouched against the saloon wall. "Weren't aiming at no shop, lady, just having a bit of fun. No harm done." Amelia's head whipped toward him. "No harm done? You could have murdered a child." "But I didn't," Dutch said, standing up and swaggering toward her. He reeked of whiskey and sweat. "So why don't you run back to your needles and thread and leave the men to their business?" The crowd had gone silent. Samuel Harding's jaw tightened, and he dismounted in one fluid motion. "Dutch, that's enough. Get back to the ranch." But Amelia wasn't finished. She turned back to Samuel, her chest heaving with emotion. "You're responsible for him. You brought these men here. You let them drink themselves stupid and shoot up our town. Someone is going to die, and it will be on your conscience." Samuel met her gaze, and for a moment something passed between them, an understanding perhaps, or a recognition of equal stubbornness. "I said I'll handle it, Miss Lawson." "Handle it?" Amelia laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You've been handling it for months. Your word means nothing to me, Mr. Harding, nothing." Dutch Anderson made a crude sound. "Listen to her, boss. She's got more spine than half the men in this town. Maybe she thinks she's man enough to face down a real cowboy." The words were barely out of his mouth when Amelia turned to Dutch, her face pale but determined. "If Mr. Harding won't control you, then perhaps you need to be controlled another way. I challenge you to a duel." The street erupted in shocked murmurs. Samuel's eyes widened. "Miss Lawson, that's not necessary." "A duel?" Dutch laughed, but it sounded nervous. "You're crazy, lady." "Am I?" Amelia's voice was steady now, cold and clear. "You've impugned my honor by suggesting I'm not capable of defending my town and my livelihood. You've endangered children. You've shown nothing but contempt for the people who live here. So yes, I challenge you to a duel. Tomorrow at dawn in the square, unless you're too cowardly to face a woman." Samuel stepped between them. "This is ridiculous. Dutch, apologize to Miss Lawson right now." I ain't apologizing to no woman, Dutch spat. And I ain't dueling her either. It's beneath me. Beneath you? Amelia's voice dripped with scorn. Then you're admitting you're a coward who can only be brave when shooting at unarmed shopkeepers and children. Dutch's face turned purple. Fine. You want a duel, you got one. But don't come crying when you get hurt. Dutch, no! Samuel grabbed his man's arm. But Dutch shook him off. She asked for it, boss. Not my fault if she's too stupid to know when to shut her mouth. Samuel turned to Amelia, and she saw something in his eyes she hadn't expected. Concern. Real. Genuine concern. Miss Lawson, please reconsider. This is dangerous. So is living in a town where lawless men can do whatever they please, Amelia said quietly. I'll see you tomorrow at dawn, Mr. Anderson. And you, Mr. Harding, can watch your man be bested by a dressmaker. She turned on her heel and walked back into her shop, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst through her ribcage. What had she just done? She'd never fired a gun in her life. She'd never even held one. But she couldn't back down now. She wouldn't. That evening, as the sun set over the red rock mesas west of Parowan, turning the sky the color of flame, there was a knock on Amelia's door. She opened it to find Samuel Harding standing on her doorstep, his hat in his hands, looking uncomfortable and determined in equal measure. Miss Lawson, may I come in? Amelia wanted to refuse, but curiosity won out. She stepped aside, and he entered her small parlor, which also served as her fitting room. Bolts of fabric lined the walls, and a half-finished dress hung on a mannequin in the corner. I came to ask you to withdraw your challenge, Samuel said without preamble. Dutch Anderson is a crack shot. He's dangerous, and he doesn't have a gentleman's sense of honor. He'll shoot to kill. Then he'll shoot to kill, Amelia said, moving to stand by the window. I meant what I said, Mr. Harding. Your men have terrorized this town for the last time. So you're willing to die to prove a point? Samuel's voice rose with frustration. That's not brave, Miss Lawson. That's foolish. Amelia spun to face him. And what would you have me do? Smile and curtsy and accept that this is just how things are? Accept that men like Dutch Anderson can do whatever they please because they're faster with a gun? I'll fire him, Samuel said quickly. I'll fire him tonight and send him packing. Will that satisfy you? And then what? He'll just go work for another ranch and terrorize another town. No, Mr. Harding. This ends tomorrow. Samuel ran a hand through his hair, and Amelia noticed for the first time how tired he looked. There were lines around his eyes, and his shoulders carried a weight she hadn't perceived before. You don't understand. Dutch is mean when he's been drinking, and he's been drinking since noon. He won't show mercy just because you're a woman. If anything, it will make him meaner. I'm not asking for mercy, Amelia crossed her arms. Why do you care anyway? You've never shown much concern for this town before. Samuel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer. That's not true. I care about Parowan. I care about the people here. I just didn't realize how much my men's behavior was affecting everyone until I saw the fear in that little girl's eyes today, until I saw the anger in yours. Amelia felt something shift inside her chest. She'd expected arrogance, maybe anger, but not this quiet admission. Then help me change things. By letting you get killed? That's not help. Then teach me to shoot. Samuel blinked. What? You heard me. I have until dawn. That gives us about 8 hours. Teach me to shoot well enough that I have a fighting chance. 8 hours isn't enough time to learn to outdraw a man like Dutch Anderson. Then I'll have to be smarter than him, won't I? Amelia moved closer to Samuel, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his whiskey-colored eyes. Please, if you truly care about this town, help me. Samuel stared at her for a long moment, and she could see the war playing out behind his eyes. Finally, he exhaled slowly. You're the stubbornest woman I've ever met. I'll take that as a compliment. It wasn't meant as one. but there was something that might have been admiration in his voice. Get a coat. We're going somewhere private where Dutch won't hear the shots and get suspicious. They rode out of town just as full darkness fell, Samuel on his black stallion and Amelia on her gentle mare, Rosie. He led her to a box canyon about 3 miles south of Parowan, a place where the red sandstone walls would contain the sound of gunfire. A creek ran through the bottom of the canyon, and cottonwood trees rustled in the evening breeze. Samuel dismounted and helped Amelia down, his hands strong and steady at her waist. For a moment they stood close enough that she could smell leather and sage on him, and something else, something warm and masculine that made her pulse quicken. Then he stepped back and pulled a pistol from his belt. "This is a Colt Peacemaker," he said, showing her the weapon. "It's probably the most common sidearm in the West right now. 6 shots. You have to cock the hammer before each shot like this." He demonstrated, the metallic click loud in the quiet canyon. "The trigger pull is light, so you don't need to use much pressure." Amelia watched carefully, trying to memorize every movement. When Samuel handed her the gun, she was surprised by its weight. It felt heavy and deadly in her hand, and she had a moment of doubt so profound it almost knocked her to her knees. What was she doing? She was a dressmaker from Philadelphia, not a gunfighter. Samuel must have seen something in her face because he moved closer, his voice gentle. "It's okay to be scared. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite it." "Is that what you tell yourself when you're afraid?" Amelia asked, looking up at him. "Every single time." Samuel smiled, and it transformed his face, making him look younger, less burdened. "Now let's talk about stance. In a formal duel, you'll stand sideways to your opponent, which makes you a smaller target, like this." He positioned himself, and Amelia studied the way he balanced his weight, the way he held his body. Then she tried to mirror his stance, and he moved behind her to adjust her position. His hands on her shoulders were warm even through the fabric of her dress and coat. "Good. Now when you draw, the motion should be smooth, not jerky. You're not trying to be the fastest, you're trying to be accurate. Dutch will probably draw first, but if you can make him miss, you'll have time for a clear shot." They spent the next 2 hours practicing draw and aim. Amelia's hands cramped, her arms ached, and her ears rang from the gunshots echoing off the canyon walls. But she kept going, kept trying, driven by determination and something else, something she was only beginning to recognize. Every time Samuel stepped close to correct her grip or adjust her stance, her heart beat faster. Every time he praised her progress, warmth flooded through her. "You're a natural," Samuel said after she managed to hit a tin can he'd placed on a rock 20 feet away. "Steady hands, good eye. If you'd started learning as a child, you'd be formidable." "I have started as a child," Amelia said wryly. "My childhood ended about 6 hours ago when I challenged a man to a gunfight." Samuel laughed, a real laugh that echoed off the canyon walls. "Fair point. Are you always this sharp-tongued?" "Only when people try to kill children in my shop." Amelia lowered the gun, her arms trembling with fatigue. "Or when arrogant cattle ranchers let their employees run wild." "Arrogant?" Samuel raised an eyebrow. "That's twice now you've insulted me. Should I be keeping count?" "Only if you plan to challenge me to a duel, too, though I should warn you I'm getting rather good at these." They grinned at each other, and something sparked between them, bright and unexpected. Then Samuel's expression grew serious. "Miss Lawson, Amelia, I need you to understand something. Even with everything you've learned tonight, the odds are not in your favor tomorrow. Dutch is fast and mean, and he's not going to follow the gentleman's code. If you want to back out, no one would blame you." "I would blame me." Amelia met his gaze steadily. "I have to do this, Samuel, not just for the town, but for myself. I left Philadelphia because I was tired of being told what I could and couldn't do. Tired of being treated like a decoration. If I back down now, I might as well have stayed there and married the banker my father chose for me." Samuel nodded slowly. "Then we better make sure you're ready." He pulled out his pocket watch and checked it in the moonlight. "We have 5 more hours until dawn. Let's use them." They worked through the night, pausing only once to water the horses and share the canteen Samuel had brought. As the hours passed, Amelia felt herself growing more confident with the weapon. Her draw became smoother, her aim more certain. But more than that, she found herself growing increasingly aware of the man teaching her. Samuel Harding was nothing like she'd assumed. Yes, he was rough around the edges. Yes, he could be blunt. But he was also patient and encouraging. He told her stories about learning to shoot from his father on a ranch in Texas, about coming to Utah 5 years ago with nothing but a horse and a dream. He'd built his ranch from scratch, working harder than any of his men, sleeping under the stars until he could afford to build a house. "Why do you let men like Dutch Anderson work for you?" Amelia asked as they sat on a boulder, resting between practice rounds. "You're clearly a good man. Why surround yourself with bad ones?" Samuel was quiet for a long moment. "Because good men are hard to find, and ranch work is harder. Dutch is a drunk and a troublemaker, but he's also one of the best wranglers I've ever seen. He can gentle a wild horse faster than anyone. I thought I could control his bad habits, keep him in line. I was wrong." "We all make mistakes," Amelia said softly. "The measure of a person is whether they learn from them." Samuel looked at her, and in the moonlight his eyes seemed to glow. "When did you get so wise?" "When I left behind everything familiar and built a new life in a strange place. It teaches you things about yourself." "I imagine it does." Samuel stood and offered her his hand. "One more round of practice, and then we should head back. You'll need at least a little rest before dawn." They practiced until the eastern sky began to lighten from black to deep blue. Amelia's final shot hit the tin can dead center, and Samuel let out a whoop of approval. "That's it! That's perfect!" Amelia lowered the gun, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had kept her going through the night was fading, and reality was setting in. In less than 2 hours, she would face Dutch Anderson. She might die. The thought made her knees weak. Samuel caught her as she swayed. "Easy, you're running on fumes. Let's get you back to town." They rode back in silence as the sky brightened to pink and gold. When they reached Amelia's shop, Samuel dismounted and helped her down, his hands lingering at her waist. "Amelia, you don't have to do this. We can still call it off." "I do have to do this." Amelia looked up at him, seeing the concern etched in every line of his face. "But thank you. For everything. For teaching me. For believing I could learn." "I believe you can do anything you set your mind to," Samuel said quietly. "You're the strongest woman I've ever met." Something passed between them then, something profound and unspoken. Amelia reached up and touched his cheek, feeling the rough stubble under her palm. "Win or lose today, I want you to know that you changed my mind about something." "What's that?" "I thought all cattlemen were arrogant, thoughtless brutes, but you're not. You're kind and patient and good. Don't forget that about yourself." Samuel caught her hand and pressed it more firmly against his cheek. "Don't talk like you're saying goodbye. You're going to walk away from this duel. You're going to be fine." "Of course I am," Amelia said with more confidence than she felt. "I have an excellent teacher." The town square was packed with people when Amelia emerged from her shop at dawn. Word of the duel had spread, and it seemed like everyone in Parowan had turned out to watch. Amelia wore a simple brown riding skirt and white blouse, her hair braided and pinned close to her head. The borrowed colt Samuel had given her felt impossibly heavy at her hip. Dutch Anderson stood in the center of the square, looking smug and mean. He'd clearly been drinking already, and Amelia felt a flicker of hope. Maybe his aim would be off. Then she saw how steady his hands were and realized he was one of those men who shot better drunk than sober. The town's mayor, an elderly man named William Porter, stood between them holding a white handkerchief. "This is highly irregular," he said, his voice quavering. "Miss Lawson, I must ask one more time if you wish to withdraw your challenge." "I do not," Amelia said clearly. "Then the rules are as follows. You will stand back to back. At my signal, you will each take 10 paces, turn, and fire at will. The duel continues until one party is unable to continue or calls defeat. Are these terms understood? Both Amelia and Dutch nodded. Amelia's heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. She scanned the crowd and found Samuel standing at the edge, his face tight with worry. Their eyes met, and he gave her a tiny nod of encouragement. "Take your positions," Mayor Porter said. Amelia and Dutch stood back to back. She could feel him breathing, could smell the whiskey coming off him in waves. Her hand hovered over the grip of her pistol. "One," the mayor called. Amelia took a step forward, her boots loud on the packed dirt. "Two." She focused on her breathing the way Samuel had taught her, slow and steady. "Three." The crowd had gone completely silent. Even the birds seemed to have stopped singing. "Four." Halfway there. Amelia's hand was trembling now. She clenched it into a fist, then released it. 5, 6, 7. 3 more steps. 3 more steps, and she would turn and face a man who wanted to kill her. 8, 9, 10. Amelia spun, her hand moving to her gun, but Dutch was faster, much faster. She heard the click of his hammer, saw his gun rising, and time seemed to slow down. This was it. This was how she would die. In the dusty square of a Utah town trying to prove a point. And then Samuel Harding stepped into the square. He moved so fast that at first Amelia didn't understand what was happening. He simply appeared between her and Dutch, his own gun drawn, and his voice rang out loud and clear. "That's enough!" Dutch's gun was aimed at Samuel's chest now instead of Amelia's. "Get out of the way, boss! This ain't your fight!" "Like hell it isn't," Samuel said. His voice was hard, harder than Amelia had ever heard it. "You want to shoot someone, Dutch? Shoot me, but you're not touching her." "Samuel, no!" Amelia's voice broke. "Get out of the way!" But Samuel didn't move. He stood there, solid and unmovable, his gun pointed at Dutch. "Here's how this is going to work, Dutch. You're going to holster your weapon and leave town. You're fired, and if I ever see you around Parowan again, I'll shoot you myself." Dutch's face twisted with rage. "You're choosing this woman over your own man, over loyalty?" "I'm choosing what's right over what's easy," Samuel said. "Something I should have done a long time ago. Now holster your weapon or draw on me. Your choice." For a long, terrible moment, Amelia thought Dutch would shoot. His finger tightened on the trigger, and she opened her mouth to scream. But then Dutch saw something in Samuel's eyes, something that made him hesitate. Slowly, with visible reluctance, he lowered his gun. "You're making a mistake, boss," Dutch said. "The mistake was ever hiring you," Samuel replied. "Now get out of my sight." Dutch holstered his gun and stalked away toward the saloon, and a collective exhale went through the crowd. But Amelia barely noticed. She was staring at Samuel, her mind reeling. He had stepped into the line of fire for her. He had been willing to die for her. Samuel turned to face her, and his expression was complicated. Relief, anger, fear, all mixed together. "Are you out of your mind?" he demanded. "What were you thinking, challenging Dutch to a duel? You could have been killed." "I was thinking about protecting my town," Amelia shot back, but her voice was shaking. "I was thinking that someone needed to stand up to men like him." "So you decided to get yourself shot?" "So I decided to do something." They were shouting at each other in the middle of the square, and the crowd was watching with fascination. Samuel ran a hand through his hair, and when he spoke again, his voice was quieter but no less intense. "You terrified me. When I saw Dutch draw on you, when I realized he was actually going to shoot, I've never been so scared in my entire life." Amelia felt something crack open inside her chest. "So you stepped in front of a gun for me?" "Yes," Samuel said simply. "I stepped in front of a gun for you because somewhere between you challenging Dutch and me teaching you to shoot, I fell in love with you, Amelia Lawson, and I'd rather die than watch you get hurt." The square erupted in gasps and murmurs, but Amelia didn't hear them. She was staring at Samuel, her eyes wide. "You love me?" "I love you," Samuel repeated, and now his voice was gentle. I know it's fast, I know it's probably crazy, but I don't care. I love your courage and your stubbornness and the way you look at the world like you can fix it through sheer force of will. I love that you challenged a gunfighter to defend children you barely know. I love everything about you." Tears were streaming down Amelia's face now. She took a step toward him, then another, and then she was in his arms, and he was holding her like she was something precious and breakable. "I thought you were going to die," she whispered against his chest. "When you stepped in front of Dutch's gun, I thought I was going to watch you die." "I'm right here," Samuel murmured into her hair. "I'm not going anywhere." Amelia pulled back just enough to look up at him. "I love you too. I think I started falling in love with you in that canyon last night when you were so patient with me. When you treated me like I was capable and strong. No one's ever made me feel that way before." Samuel cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears. "You are capable and strong. You're the strongest person I know." And then he kissed her, right there in the town square with half of Parowan watching. It was a kiss full of relief and love and promise, and Amelia felt herself melting into it, her arms wrapping around his neck. Nothing else mattered in that moment. Not the watching crowd, not the danger that had just passed, nothing but the feeling of Samuel's lips on hers and the knowledge that she was loved. When they finally pulled apart, Mayor Porter cleared his throat loudly. "I suppose the duel is called off, then?" "The duel is definitely called off," Samuel said, without taking his eyes off Amelia. "But I have a new challenge. Miss Amelia Lawson, I challenge you to marry me." The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Amelia laughed, joy bubbling up inside her. "That's not how proposals usually work, Mr. Harding." "Nothing about us has been usual so far," Samuel pointed out. "Why start now?" "Fair point." Amelia pretended to consider, tapping her chin. "Very well. I accept your challenge, but I have conditions." "Name them." "You have to clean up your ranch. No more drunk cowboys shooting up the town. No more terrorizing the good people of Parowan." "Done," Samuel said immediately. "What else?" "You have to respect that I'm going to keep my dress shop. I'm not giving up my business just because I'm getting married." "I wouldn't dream of asking you to." Samuel grinned. "You're too good at what you do. Half the women in the county come to you for their dresses." "And one more thing," Amelia's voice grew serious. "You have to promise that we'll always face things together. No more stepping in front of guns without consulting me first. We're partners, Samuel. Equals. If that's not acceptable to you, then I can't marry you." Samuel's expression softened with love and respect. "Partners," he agreed. "Equals. Always. I promise, Amelia, from now on, we face everything together." "Then yes," Amelia said, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, I'll marry you." Samuel kissed her again, and this time the cheers were deafening. People rushed forward to congratulate them, and Amelia found herself swept up in a tide of well wishes and hugs. Mrs. Chen from the general store was crying happy tears. Little Sarah Mitchell, the girl who had nearly been shot, brought Amelia a bouquet of wildflowers she must have picked that morning. Even grumpy old Sheriff Daniels cracked a smile. But through it all, Amelia's hand stayed in Samuel's, their fingers intertwined. She looked up at him, this man who had appeared in her life so unexpectedly, and felt a certainty settle into her bones. This was right. This was meant to be. The wedding took place 3 weeks later on a perfect September day. The whole town turned out for it, and Amelia wore a dress she'd made herself, cream-colored silk with lace at the collar and cuffs. Samuel wore his best suit, his hair neatly combed, looking both handsome and slightly uncomfortable in formal wear. They were married by the circuit preacher in the small church at the edge of town, with the red rock mesas visible through the windows. When Samuel slipped the gold band on Amelia's finger, his hand was shaking slightly, and she loved him even more for being nervous. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the preacher said. "You may kiss your bride." Samuel pulled Amelia close and kissed her softly, tenderly, as if they had all the time in the world. And they did, Amelia thought. They had a whole lifetime ahead of them. The celebration afterward was held at Samuel's ranch, which was a sprawling property 10 miles south of town. Amelia had been there several times during their engagement, and each time she'd been struck by how beautiful it was. The house was built of adobe and wood, with a wide porch that looked out over rolling grasslands. Mountains rose in the distance, purple and majestic against the sky. Samuel had been true to his word about cleaning up his operation. He'd fired 3 more troublemakers in addition to Dutch, and the men he'd kept on were hard-working and respectful. He'd also hired 2 young men fresh from farming families, giving them their first chance at ranch work. The whole atmosphere of the place had changed, becoming lighter and more hopeful. As the sun set and the party moved into full swing, Samuel pulled Amelia aside to the porch. They stood together, watching the sky turn orange and pink, his arm around her waist. "Happy?" he asked softly. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Amelia admitted. "When I came to Utah 3 years ago, I was running away from something, but today I feel like I've run toward something instead. Toward this. Toward you." Samuel kissed her temple. "I used to think I was meant to be alone. I worked hard, I built this ranch, but at the end of every day the house felt empty. I didn't even realize how lonely I was until you stormed into my life and challenged my cowboy to a duel." Amelia laughed. "Not my finest moment of judgment." "I don't know about that. If you hadn't, I might never have really noticed you. I might have let you stay the angry dressmaker who yelled at me in the street." Samuel turned her to face him. "But you made me see you, Amelia. You made me see what courage really looks like, what strength really looks like. And I'll be grateful for that for the rest of my life." "You showed me strength too," Amelia said, reaching up to touch his face. "You showed me that admitting you're wrong takes more courage than defending yourself, that caring about people matters more than being right." They stood there for a long moment, just holding each other as the stars began to appear overhead. Then Samuel's expression turned mischievous. "So, Mrs. Harding, are you ready to learn to ride tomorrow?" Amelia groaned. "Can't I have at least a day off from learning dangerous new skills?" "Nope. You're a rancher's wife now. You need to know how to ride properly, not just that gentle trot Rosie does." "Rosie's trot is perfectly adequate," Amelia protested, but she was smiling. "It's adorable," Samuel agreed, "but not practical. Don't worry, I'll be patient with you, just like I was when I taught you to shoot." "You mean when you stood behind me and put your arms around me to correct my grip?" Amelia raised an eyebrow. "I'm fairly certain that was at least partly an excuse to hold me." Samuel grinned, not denying it. "Can you blame me? You were beautiful when you were concentrating with that little furrow between your eyebrows." "I do not furrow." "You absolutely furrow. It's adorable." They were still laughing when Samuel's foreman, a weathered older man named Tom Fletcher, came to find them. "Sorry to interrupt, boss, but some of the hands want to make a toast." Back inside, the ranch hands gathered around with glasses raised. Tom spoke for them all, his voice gruff with emotion. "Mr. Harding, you took a bunch of us in when we didn't have nowhere else to go. You gave us good work and fair pay. And now you found yourself a woman who's got more grit than most men I know." He turned to Amelia. "Madam, you keep him honest. He's a good man, but he works too hard and forgets to take care of himself. Make sure he remembers to come in for supper." "I will," Amelia promised, touched by the obvious affection between Samuel and his men. The toasts continued, each one more heartfelt than the last. By the end, Amelia's eyes were damp, and Samuel had to clear his throat several times. These men, she realized, were more than just employees to him. They were family. That night, after the last guest had gone home and the ranch was quiet, Samuel carried Amelia over the threshold of their bedroom. It was a large room with windows facing east to catch the morning light, and Amelia had spent the past week making it beautiful. Lace curtains hung at the windows, and a quilt she'd sewn herself covered the large bed. Samuel set her down gently, and suddenly they were both nervous. They'd been alone together plenty of times during their courtship, but this was different. This was their wedding night, the beginning of their married life. "Amelia," Samuel said softly, taking her hands. We don't have to rush anything. We have all the time in the world. Amelia looked up at him. This good man who had stepped in front of a gun for her, who had challenged her to be brave, who loved her exactly as she was. I'm not afraid, she said, not when I'm with you. He kissed her then, slowly and sweetly, and Amelia felt any remaining nervousness melt away. This was Samuel, her husband, her partner, the man she loved more than life itself. The months that followed were full of joy and adjustment. Amelia kept her dress shop, riding into town 3 days a week to meet with customers and work on orders. Samuel never complained about her work, never suggested she should stay home instead. He was proud of her skill, proud of what she'd built. In return, Amelia learned the rhythms of ranch life. She learned to ride, not just Rosie's gentle trot, but a real gallop across the open range with the wind in her hair. She learned to help with the ranch accounts, discovering she had a head for numbers. She learned to cook hearty meals for the ranch hands and to mend their torn shirts and pants, but more than that, she learned what it meant to build a life with someone. She and Samuel didn't always agree. Sometimes they argued fiercely about ranch decisions or town politics, but they always talked it through, always treated each other with respect, always remembered their promise to be partners and equals. That first winter was hard. Snow fell heavy in the mountains, and temperatures dropped below zero. Several of the cattle got sick, and Samuel spent long nights in the barn trying to save them. Amelia would bring him coffee and food, sitting with him in the warm straw, her presence a comfort even when there was nothing else she could do. I'm sorry, Samuel said one particularly difficult night, after they'd lost a calf despite their best efforts. This isn't the romantic life you probably imagined when you agreed to marry me. Amelia took his hand, not caring that it was dirty with straw and medicine. Samuel Harding, I didn't marry you for romance. I married you because you're good and kind and because you see me as your equal. This life, whatever it brings, is exactly what I want, as long as we're facing it together. Samuel pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. I love you so much it scares me sometimes. I know, Amelia whispered. I feel the same way. Spring came eventually, as it always does, bringing new grass and new calves and new hope. The ranch prospered under Samuel's careful management and Amelia's detailed record-keeping. They hired 2 more men, both young and eager to learn, and the place hummed with productive energy. In April, Amelia realized she'd missed her monthly courses. She waited another month to be sure, then rode into town to see Dr. Margaret Sullivan, one of the few female doctors in Utah Territory. Dr. Sullivan confirmed what Amelia had suspected. She was pregnant. Amelia sat with the news for a few hours, letting it settle into her bones. A baby. She and Samuel were going to have a baby. The thought filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. She was only 25, but she'd seen enough of life to know that childbirth was dangerous. Women died. Babies died, but women also lived. Babies also lived, and she would be one of them. She had to believe that. That evening she told Samuel over supper he'd just taken a bite of roast chicken when she said, "I'm pregnant," and he promptly choked, coughing until his eyes watered. "You're what?" he managed to gasp. "Pregnant," Amelia repeated, suddenly nervous. "With child? In the family way? About 3 months along, Dr. Sullivan thinks." Samuel stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then slowly a smile spread across his face, so wide and genuine that it transformed him. "We're having a baby?" "We're having a baby," Amelia confirmed. Samuel let out a whoop of joy and jumped up from the table, pulling Amelia into his arms and spinning her around. "We're having a baby! Amelia! We're going to be parents!" "Careful," Amelia laughed, dizzy from the spinning. "You'll make me sick." Samuel set her down immediately, suddenly solicitous. "Are you sick? Does it hurt? Should you be sitting down? Should you be lying down?" "Samuel, breathe," Amelia said, taking his hands. "I'm fine. I'm healthy. Dr. Sullivan says everything looks good. The baby should come in December, around Christmas." "A Christmas baby," Samuel said wonderingly. He placed a hand on Amelia's still flat stomach. Our baby. I can't believe it. I'm going to be a father. Are you happy? Amelia asked, needing to hear him say it. Happy? Samuel's eyes were wet. Amelia, I'm more than happy. I'm overwhelmed. I'm terrified. I'm so full of joy I feel like I might burst. He kissed her softly. Thank you. Thank you for this gift. Thank you for building this life with me. Thank you for being someone I want to build it with, Amelia replied. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer and fall. Amelia worked in her shop until October, when the baby got big enough that bending over the sewing machine became uncomfortable. She hired a young woman named Beth Carson to help with orders, training her carefully so the shop could continue running even when Amelia couldn't be there. Samuel was ridiculously overprotective. He didn't want Amelia lifting anything, riding anywhere, or doing much of anything besides sitting still and growing the baby. Amelia bore his hovering with good humor for the most part, though she did occasionally have to remind him that she was pregnant, not made of glass. I'm just worried, Samuel admitted one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. Childbirth is dangerous, Amelia. I couldn't bear it if something happened to you. Nothing is going to happen to me, Amelia said with more confidence than she felt. Dr. Sullivan will be here, and your mother is coming from Texas to help, and I'm young and healthy. Everything will be fine. Samuel's mother, Eleanor Harding, arrived in early December. She was a small, tough woman with silver hair and Samuel's whiskey-colored eyes. Within hours of arriving, she'd taken over the kitchen and started organizing everything in preparation for the baby's arrival. I like her, Amelia told Samuel that first night. She doesn't fuss, she just does. That's Ma, Samuel said with affection. She raised 5 boys mostly on her own after my father died. Nothing rattles her. Eleanor was indeed unflappable. When Amelia went into labor on December 20th, during a snowstorm, Eleanor simply heated water, laid out clean linens, and sent one of the ranch hands to fetch Dr. Sullivan. Babies come when they're ready, she said calmly. No point in panicking. But Samuel panicked enough for everyone. He paced the living room wearing a path in the rug, jumping at every sound from the bedroom. His foreman Tom finally took pity on him and broke out a bottle of whiskey. Have a drink, boss. It's going to be a long night. It was indeed a long night. Labor stretched through the dark hours, and Amelia discovered reserves of strength she didn't know she possessed. It hurt more than she could have imagined, but Eleanor and Dr. Sullivan were there, coaching her through each contraction, and knowing Samuel was just outside gave her courage. Finally, as dawn light crept through the windows, Amelia gave one last desperate push, and a baby's cry split the air. It's a boy, Doctor, Sullivan announced. A healthy baby boy. Amelia collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted and exhilarated. A boy. She'd had a boy. Eleanor quickly cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a soft blanket, then placed him in Amelia's arms. He was tiny and red-faced and perfect. Amelia stared down at him, feeling a love so fierce it took her breath away. This was her son, hers and Samuel's, a new life they'd created together. Can I bring in the father? Eleanor asked with a smile. Please, Amelia said. Samuel burst into the room like he'd been shot from a cannon. His eyes were wild, his hair standing on end from running his hands through it. Amelia, are you all right? Is the baby all right? We're both fine, Amelia said softly. Come meet your son. Samuel approached the bed slowly, almost reverently. When he looked down at the baby in Amelia's arms, his face crumpled with emotion. He's so small. He's perfect, Amelia corrected. Would you like to hold him? Samuel looked terrified. What if I drop him? You won't drop him, Eleanor said firmly. Here, sit in the chair and I'll show you how. Samuel sat, and Eleanor carefully placed the baby in his arms, showing him how to support the head. Samuel stared down at his son with an expression of absolute wonder. Hello there, little one. I'm your father. Your mom and I have been waiting so long to meet you. The baby yawned, a tiny sound, and Samuel laughed with delight. Did you see that? He yawned. Babies do that, Eleanor said dryly, but she was smiling. They named him Jacob Samuel Harding, Jake for short. He was a good baby, healthy and strong, with Samuel's eyes and Amelia's dark hair. Samuel was a devoted father, changing diapers and walking the floor with Jake when he cried at night, insisting that Amelia needed her rest. "I never knew I could love like this," Samuel admitted one night as he rocked Jake back to sleep. "I thought I loved you as much as it was possible to love someone, but then he came along and my heart just expanded. It's like there's infinite room for love." "I know exactly what you mean," Amelia said, watching her two men together. "Every time I look at him, I fall in love all over again. With him, with you, with this life we've built." Eleanor stayed through the winter, helping with Jake and teaching Amelia the skills she'd need as a mother. When she finally left in March to return to Texas, she hugged Amelia tightly. "You're a good mother," she said, "and you've made my son happier than I ever thought possible. Thank you for that." "Thank you for raising him to be the man he is," Amelia replied. The years that followed were full and rich. Jake grew from a baby into a toddler, then a little boy. Curious and fearless like his father, kind like his mother. When he was 3, Amelia gave birth to twin girls Emma and Grace. Samuel was utterly undone by his daughters, 2 tiny creatures with auburn hair and green eyes who had him wrapped around their fingers from day one. The dress shop continued to thrive, with Beth eventually becoming a full partner. The ranch prospered too, becoming known throughout Utah territory for the quality of its cattle and the integrity of its owner. Samuel served on the town council, working to improve schools and roads. Amelia organized a women's auxiliary that raised funds for a new library. They faced challenges, of course. There were bad years when drought killed the grass and they had to sell off part of the herd. There were illnesses and injuries, close calls that reminded them how fragile life could be. But they faced everything together, just as they'd promised, partners and equals in all things. One evening when Jake was 10 and the twins were 7, the family sat together on the porch watching the sun set over the Red Rock mesas. It was June, and the air was warm and sweet with the smell of sage. Jake was telling some elaborate story about a snake he'd seen, and the twins were arguing about whose turn it was to feed the chickens. Samuel reached over and took Amelia's hand, their fingers intertwining automatically after so many years. She looked over at him and smiled, and he smiled back. And in that moment, everything they'd been through, everything they'd built, was contained in that simple exchange of smiles. "Do you ever think about that day in the town square?" Samuel asked later, after the children were in bed. "When you challenged Dutch to a duel?" "Sometimes," Amelia admitted. "It seems like a lifetime ago, like that was a different person entirely." "In some ways it was," Samuel said. "We've both changed so much since then." "Do you regret any of it?" Amelia asked. "The changes, I mean. Giving up your wild cowboys and your rough bachelor life?" Samuel pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "Not for a single second. You gave me everything I didn't even know I wanted. A family, a home, a life full of love and meaning. I'd do it all again in a heartbeat." "Even stepping in front of Dutch's gun?" "Especially that," Samuel said, "because that was the moment I admitted to myself that I loved you, that you were more important than my pride or my fear or anything else. That was the moment my real life began." Amelia turned in his arms to look up at him. After all these years, he could still make her heart race. "Mine too. When you stepped into that square, when you were willing to die for me, I knew I'd found something rare. Someone who would always stand beside me, no matter what." "Always," Samuel promised, "until the day I die and beyond, if such a thing is possible." They stood there in the starlight, holding each other, listening to the night sounds of the ranch. Somewhere a coyote howled. Closer, one of the horses nickered softly. Inside, they heard one of the twins cry out from a dream, and Samuel moved to go check on her, but Amelia stopped him. "I'll go," she said. "You've been up since before dawn." "We'll both go," Samuel compromised. They walked inside together, hand in hand, to comfort their daughter and check on their sleeping son. This was their life now, Not dramatic duels in town squares or passionate confessions in front of crowds, but these quiet moments of partnership and care. Feeding chickens and mending fences and rocking frightened children back to sleep, and it was perfect. It was everything. As the years continued to pass, the Harding Ranch became a landmark in the area. Young men came from all over to learn ranching from Samuel, drawn by his reputation for fairness and skill. Women came from far and wide to commission dresses from Amelia or to learn sewing from Beth at the shop. Jake grew into a fine young man, eventually taking over much of the ranch management. The twins, Emma and Grace, both showed artistic talent, Emma in painting and Grace in music. When Amelia was 38 and Samuel was 41, they welcomed one more surprise baby, a son they named Daniel. The older children doted on him, and Samuel declared that his heart, which he'd thought couldn't possibly expand anymore, had somehow found room for yet more love. "We're going to be ancient by the time this one's grown," Samuel said, holding baby Daniel and watching the sunset one evening. "Speak for yourself," Amelia replied. "I'm nowhere near ancient." "You're right. You're as beautiful as the day you challenged Dutch Anderson to a duel and scared me half to death." "I scared you? You stepped in front of his gun. Only because you were about to let him shoot you." They were laughing, the sound carrying across the ranch, and their children, hearing it, smiled. They'd grown up surrounded by this love, this partnership, this example of what marriage could be. It had shaped them, made them believe in the possibility of finding what their parents had found. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Samuel planned a surprise for Amelia. He hired someone to manage the ranch for the weekend and took her back to the box canyon where he'd taught her to shoot all those years ago. They rode out just as the sun was setting, and when they reached the canyon, Amelia gasped. Samuel had arranged for a picnic to be set up near the creek. There was a blanket spread on the grass, a basket of food, and lanterns hanging from the cottonwood trees. It was simple but beautiful, the lights reflecting off the water, the canyon walls glowing orange in the last rays of sunlight. "Samuel, this is beautiful," Amelia breathed. "Not as beautiful as you," Samuel said, helping her dismount. "I wanted to bring you back here because this is where I first really saw you. Not as the angry woman yelling at me in the street, but as the courageous, determined, extraordinary person you are. This is where I fell in love with you." Amelia felt tears prick her eyes. "I fell in love with you here too, when you were patient with me, when you treated me like I was capable of anything." They sat together on the blanket, eating and talking and watching the stars come out. After all these years, they still had so much to say to each other. They talked about the children, about the ranch, about their dreams for the future. They talked about everything and nothing, the way people who truly know each other can. "Do you remember what you said to me that night?" Samuel asked, as when we were resting between practice rounds. "I said a lot of things that night." "You said that the measure of a person is whether they learn from their mistakes," Samuel said. "That's stuck with me all these years. You've made me want to be better, Amelia, to learn and grow and change. You've made me the best version of myself." "You've done the same for me," Amelia said softly. "You showed me that I could be strong and vulnerable at the same time, that needing someone doesn't make you weak, that love doesn't diminish you, it expands you." Samuel kissed her then, slow and sweet, and Amelia felt the same spark she'd felt on their wedding day, in the town square, in that hotel room all those years ago. Some things, she thought, never changed. Some things only got better with time. They stayed in the canyon late into the night, lying on the blanket and looking up at the stars. The same stars that had watched over them that first night when Amelia had been terrified and determined, and Samuel had been patient and kind. The same stars that had witnessed the beginning of their love story. "I would do it all again," Amelia said suddenly. "Every difficult moment, every scary decision, I would do it all again to end up right here, right now, with you." "Me too," Samuel said, pulling her closer. "Though maybe next time we could skip the part where you almost get shot." "Where's the romance in that?" Amelia teased. They rode back to the ranch in the early hours of the morning, arriving just as the sun was rising over the eastern mountains. The house was quiet, the children still asleep, and for a moment, Samuel and Amelia stood in the yard, looking at everything they'd built together. The house had been expanded over the years to accommodate their growing family. There was a new barn, a bunkhouse for the ranch hands, corrals and pastures stretching as far as the eye could see. But more than the physical structures, there was the life they'd created, the love that filled every corner of this place. "Home," Amelia said softly. "Home," Samuel agreed. As the years turned and time continued its relentless march forward, Samuel and Amelia aged gracefully together. There were lines on their faces now, silver in their hair, but their love had only deepened and strengthened. They'd weathered storms together, celebrated triumphs together, grieved losses together. They'd raised 4 children who loved and respected them, who'd learned from their example what a true partnership looked like. Jake married a rancher's daughter from Beaver and took over full management of the Harding Ranch. Emma moved to Salt Lake City to pursue her painting, but returned often to visit. Grace married a music teacher and opened a music school in Parowan. And young Daniel, the surprise baby, showed signs of having inherited both his mother's business sense and his father's love of the land. When Samuel turned 65, he officially retired from active ranch work, though he still spent every day riding the property and offering advice to Jake. Amelia had long since turned the dress shop fully over to Beth, though she still sewed for pleasure and for her grandchildren, of whom there were now 7. They sat together often on the porch, watching the sun set over the mesas, holding hands and talking or simply being quiet together. They'd earned this peace, this contentment. They'd fought for it, worked for it, built it with their own hands and hearts. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't challenged Dutch that day?" Samuel asked one evening. They were in their 70s now, both still healthy but feeling their years. "Sometimes," Amelia admitted, "but I don't think we would have missed each other. I think we were meant to find our way together, one way or another." "You believe in fate, then?" "I believe in choices," Amelia said. "I chose to stand up for what I believed in, even though I was terrified. You chose to step in front of that gun, even though you could have died. We've made 1,000 choices since then, big and small, and each one has led us here. That's not fate. That's us, Samuel. That's the life we've chosen to build together." Samuel raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "Best choices I ever made." On a warm June day in 1928, exactly 50 years after that fateful duel that never happened, the town of Parowan threw a celebration for Samuel and Amelia's 50th wedding anniversary. The whole town turned out, along with ranchers and friends from all over Utah. Their children and grandchildren were there, filling the house with noise and laughter. Mayor Thomas Barrett, grandson of the mayor who'd presided over the near duel, made a speech. "Samuel and Amelia Harding have been pillars of this community for half a century," he said. "They've shown us what love looks like, what partnership looks like, what commitment looks like. They've raised fine children, built a successful business, and made Parowan a better place through their generosity and service. We are honored to celebrate them today." There were toasts and gifts, tears and laughter. But the best moment came at sunset when Samuel stood up and asked for everyone's attention. The crowd quieted, and he reached for Amelia's hand. "50 years ago," Samuel said, his voice still strong despite his age, "this woman challenged one of my cowboys to a duel. I stepped in, and instead of shooting me, I dropped my gun and told her she'd won. Not the duel, but me. My heart, my life, everything I am or ever hope to be, and she's been winning ever since." The crowd laughed and applauded. Samuel pulled Amelia to her feet and held her close. "Amelia Lawson Harding, you are the bravest, strongest, most extraordinary person I've ever known. You've given me 50 years of love and joy and adventure. You've given me children and grandchildren and a life richer than I ever imagined possible. And if I had 50 more years, I'd spend every one of them choosing you again and again and again." Amelia was crying openly now. "Samuel Harding, you stepped in front of a gun for me before you even knew if I loved you back. You've spent 50 years continuing to step in front of metaphorical guns, protecting me and our family and everyone you care about. You've been my partner, my equal, my best friend, and the great love of my life. I would do it all again in a heartbeat." They kissed, and the crowd erupted in applause and cheers. Their children rushed forward to embrace them, and for a moment they were all tangled together. 3 generations of Hardings, all products of a love that had started with a challenge and a choice and a cowboy who dropped his gun. That night, after all the guests had gone home and the house was quiet, Samuel and Amelia sat together on their porch one last time. They were tired but happy, full of good food and good memories. 50 years, Amelia said wonderingly. "It's gone so fast, Samuel. It feels like just yesterday I was threatening to shoot Dutch Anderson." "Best threat anyone ever made," Samuel said. "Changed my whole life." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the ranch. Finally, Amelia said, "I'm tired, my love. Will you help me to bed?" Samuel stood, his joints creaking a bit, and helped Amelia to her feet. They walked inside together, hand in hand as always, and prepared for bed. As they lay together in the darkness, Amelia's head on Samuel's shoulder, she felt a deep sense of peace settle over her. This was how it was meant to be. This long, full, beautiful life. These children and grandchildren. This partnership that had endured through joy and sorrow, triumph and hardship. This love that had never wavered, never diminished, only grown stronger and deeper with each passing year. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Samuel replied. "Always have, always will." They fell asleep that way, wrapped in each other's arms. And if their sleep was deeper and more peaceful than usual, neither of them noticed. They simply drifted off together, as they'd done everything else in their lives. Samuel passed away peacefully in his sleep that night, his heart finally giving out after 77 years of hard use. Amelia followed him less than 12 hours later, her body simply deciding that a world without Samuel Harding in it was not a world she wanted to be in. The town mourned them deeply. The funeral was the largest Parowan had ever seen, with people coming from all over Utah and beyond to pay their respects. But even in grief, there was a sense of rightness. Samuel and Amelia had lived full lives, loved deeply, and left behind a legacy that would continue for generations. They were buried side by side in the Parowan Cemetery under a cottonwood tree with a view of the red rock mesas they'd loved. Their shared headstone bore a simple inscription: Samuel Harding, 1851-1928. Amelia Lawson Harding, 1854. 1928 partners, equals, forever. And if you visit that cemetery on a quiet evening when the sun is setting over the mesas, when the light turns everything gold and pink and the sage smells sweet, you might feel something. A sense of presence, perhaps. A whisper of love so strong it transcended even death. The story of the duel that never became legend in Parowan. Parents told it to their children, who told it to their children, each generation adding their own embellishments. But the core truth remained. A brave woman challenged a cowboy to defend her honor, and instead of fighting, he dropped his gun and chose love, and that choice changed everything. The Harding Ranch continued to prosper under Jake's management, and eventually his son's management. The dress shop became a boutique that still bore Amelia's name. Grace's music school produced talented musicians who went on to play in orchestras across the country. Emma's paintings hung in galleries and museums celebrated for their depictions of Utah's striking landscapes. But more than these physical legacies, Samuel and Amelia left behind something more precious. Proof that love could be a partnership of equals, that courage came in many forms, that choosing each other every single day was the greatest adventure of all. Their great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren would grow up hearing stories about the woman who challenged a man to a duel and the cowboy who dropped his gun and said, "You win." They would learn that winning didn't mean defeating someone, but choosing to build something together. That true strength lay not in violence, but in vulnerability. That the bravest thing you could do was open your heart to another person and trust them to handle it with care. And in this way, the love story of Samuel and Amelia Harding lived on, inspiring generation after generation to be brave enough to choose love, to stand up for what they believed in, to build lives of meaning and purpose and deep, abiding partnership. Because in the end, that's what they'd done. Against the backdrop of the wild and beautiful Utah territory, in a time when life was hard and survival was never guaranteed, they'd created something lasting. Not just children or businesses or material success, but a love story for the ages. A reminder that sometimes the greatest act of courage is not pulling the trigger, but dropping the gun. Not fighting, but choosing peace. Not winning alone, but winning together. And that, in the vast and storied history of the American West, was perhaps the most remarkable thing of all.